everybody, Mike Levin here on Monday, May 9th, 2022. And gun the gas. I am just now pulling onto I-95 North, leaving Staten Island, entering New Jersey, on my way to Pennsylvania. I'll be getting on 280 in just a few minutes here, starting my nice, easy to zone out drive, but I just felt I had to get started because, wow, just so much to talk about. What not to talk about? For me, it's a matter of narrowing it down. And I think back to what I talked about recently, and it occurs to me I'm now blending together the stuff that I've been putting in my blogs versus what I've been vlogging or YouTubing here, because it gets so blended together in my mind because it's the same basic journaling process, diary writing process. Either way, the documentation of what's on my mind, what I've been thinking about lately. So much in the personal world, so much in the professional world. And it's like I could almost spin a wheel and wherever it stops is what I talk about. But there are safe topics which are probably of slightly less interest to the world, but of slightly more value, shall we say, practical application. So the blogging itself, I'm blogging again. I've never not been writing, but I have been writing in my personal private journal, one text file for life, in Vim, and I haven't always done that. I started that, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I have like the exact date, of course, because it's the first entry. And before that, I kept journals all kinds of different ways. I would do it in Google Docs, of which I still have the separate entries, one doc per journal. I must have done it in Microsoft Word in the past, with those files being long since lost. I used to do it in my own personal web-based blogging software, especially when I worked for Scala Multimedia, Scala Digital Signage. And that I have. It was essentially in SQL. And I did an export of the web, the web part of it. And I have that as HTML zip file somewhere. I could probably blend it into one of my journals at some point through some sort of data transform. And, a lot of it leans professional. Back in those days, I was talking a lot about SQL, an active server page, and a lot of Microsoft web technology stuff. My public blogging has, for the most part, stopped because I didn't have a technique to go from my preferred my preferred writing media, the single text file for life, to some public format, which would have required sanitizing it and making excerpts or whatever. But now, as my vision gradually clears and my ability on my new Linux, Python, Vim, and Git platform solidify, every little thing gets done. Every little thing gets done. Things get easier over time with sticking to one technology, one platform, one set of tools which can be used in broad application, which are subject to the advantages of muscle memory, like Vim. Vim is the classic example because it's so much about the keyboard commands. You get better at Vim forever over time. And so this one text file for life I described to you was at some point after my move to Vim as my main text editor, and it was based on the premise that if I keep my personal journal in Vim, I'll get better at Vim and it will help me with my coding. And it has in fact paid off. It has played out in exactly that fashion, and my competency just from editing my journal with simple copy paste editing stuff that you would do in a Microsoft Word type environment, but translated over to this old school, terminal-based editor, is exactly the same general, in broad strokes, kinds of competency you need when editing code, like Python. Now, it's a little bit different with programming code, but not so much different that your muscle memory that you develop with journaling doesn't apply. It totally does. So I get faster at journaling, I get faster at programming, and there's this very righteous feedback loop. I like it. It was one of my better decisions in adjusting what tools I was on. And I considered it about all I could do to keep one text file for life, because one place to write, one place to look at things, one place to search through to find old ideas. You throw in tags, you invent your own tag system. So there is a tag system in Vim, but it's stupid. It is invisible tags, and you have to regenerate it. I wouldn't touch it with a 100-foot pole. Instead, you're writing, you throw in like _word, which happens to conflict with Markdown. So at this point, I would probably choose something. You don't want to choose hashtag word, because that conflicts with Markdown too. So you would use maybe tilde word or something like that. Something that Markdown doesn't already use, because you want to keep it Markdown compatible, just in case you do excerpt something for publishing. So back in the day, when I got started with this system, one text file for life, journal.txt, because I didn't want it to format as Markdown, because I didn't want to worry about the underscore, So journal.txt in a repo called journal that you keep as private, is great. You have the great steady mind. You have the recapturing your state from your last time sitting down. So if you need to think about something over long periods of time, you can recapture what was on your mind the last time you sat down. You just look at your last journal entry. Now, I do not advocate rereading your journal entries. Honestly, it's a waste of time. Search it from time to time to find stuff you want. And if there's a certain topic that keeps recurring, like you're writing a book or you're mentioning a person for whom you have to keep track of things, you just invent one of these tags and you use that tag whenever that topic comes up, and then you can just jump from tag to tag, and you're jumping from journal entry to journal entry. In that way, it becomes practical for searching purposes and for recall and for good memory and for accountability and a whole bunch of other things that you might think you need to reread your journal for, but you really don't. You just need it to be there and to be in a nice searchable format. Okay, so then why keep a journal if you're not going to reread it and do something with it? Well, it's because just like much with these videos, the process of articulating an idea often for the first time takes place in these formats. Vlogging for YouTube here, like I do talking to you on these driving trips, or typing for yourself, where it's nobody's business because it's never going to be published, so you can be even freer. And you can do that even freer thing here on the videos. You just never upload it to YouTube, or you do upload it to YouTube and only just keep it private. You can upload to YouTube and keep it private. You don't have to publish it. You don't have to give anyone the login. But if you want that video sitting there for your own good because you felt the need to talk to yourself, then it's there. You can go back, you can watch them, see how you felt about things in the past, and you won't lose the video. And yeah, sure, Google will know that much more about you, but honestly, really, this paranoia that people have, and it was a little bit of an issue when Trump was president, you got to admit. It's just totalitarianism. It's the rooting out of the ideologically opposed and the potential gulags in America, right? So if you believe that the United States can go the route of Nazi Germany and tyranny and totalitarianism and the execution of political enemies is always a right around the corner threat, then you probably don't want to do the kind of stuff I suggest, because the Googles of the world can't really keep this out of the hands of the government, right? So when you do private vlogging, private journaling in GitHub, what have you, you're sharing it with certain 3-letter organizations at very least. You're sharing it with Google. There will probably be transcripts, translation, the text, the speech to text transcripts embedded into the video. Anything image-wise will automatically be OCR'd, but it's to sell you stuff. It's to market to you, and they're probably not going to market to you based on the contents of your private videos, because honestly, these companies' reputations are at stake. When something is supposed to be private, they would rather keep it private. They're relying on your good digital hygiene. You don't leak, they don't leak, no one gets a tarnished reputation, right? So, Apple, had gone through a few .me and then iCloud leaks, and Steve Jobs flipped, and 2FA and all the rest of that, reinvention. And so every big cloud company has gone through at least one embarrassment. I think there was a social network from Google. What did they call that? Oh my God, was it Google Plus? There were a few of them out there, but one of them had a pretty major leak. So all the big cloud providers have their leaks, and they've paranoidly taken security precautions since, with a lot of two-factor authentication and a lot of tying it to your IEMA or something like that. There's a unique identifier in your phone, and every phone has a different one, and it's actually breaking the law to forge that or whatnot. It is so important now for the government to keep track of identities based on your electronic devices, particularly your cell phone. So, two-edged sword. So there's some privacy violations out there, mostly by the government, but there's also the use of this as a very secure key against all but the government. So when you use your phone for 2FA, you really do have some assurances that nobody but you and the spooks have access to this stuff. So what, are they going to care about your social life? If you use it for vlogging, for thinking through things in your life? No, they don't care. So I do. And I have videos that I've never published. It's not typically the case, though, because I consider it a waste of resources. I would have never done that in the past just because of the amount of, megabytes or whatever these videos take, first on your phone, then on your cloud storage, whatever. But now that kind of consideration becomes less and less important. Especially when it's not private and it's public, because, monetize it, turn on ads or whatever, and you make a few bucks off of it. It's still just, I guess the expression is beer money for me. I'm not a major YouTuber yet because no one's interested in these long rambles. Well, 10,600 people. I crossed over 10,000 recently, and then just boop, like that, it's like 10,500. And so it's going up. I apparently am finding my audience. The algorithm, the YouTube algorithm doesn't hate long-winded, genuine people anymore. So quite so much. But then, the YouTube audience doesn't particularly love long-winded, genuine people either. So, not gonna edit. I do this because I don't edit. Life is too short for editing. Let the AIs in the future put together the best excerpts of Michael Vitt. I don't care. I used to say this was mostly for me, but yeah, it's just as much for you. One text file for life. Journal.txt or whatever your preference is. And now that I've become more adept at Vim, 10 years into it, I've been using Vim longer than I've been keeping a one text file for life journal, right? So the 10 years or 10,000 hours of mastery, that there was some research paper that was very much popularized by Malcolm Gladwell through Outliers, book very dear to my heart because my dad was a Jew in the textile industry in New York City. And I got my 10,000 hours in on all Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, right? So I'm feeling the benefits. I can keep more than one text file, and I can have them all loaded at the same time. And the GitHub Pages feature, previously github.io, is a wonderful way to publish. Okay, so one text file for life, wonderful concept, great for private journaling. Not so great for a blog because you're not going to publish your private stuff, and again, there's not enough time in life to reread it and to find excerpts. You gotta do your excerpts in real time as you're writing. And as it turns out, keeping 10 or 15 files or whatever loaded in Vim at the same time, okay, because Vim space file 1, space file 2, space file 3 just loads them all into buffers that you can jump between in various ways. You can do it by numeric index, :B1 jumps you to the first one. So :B1 is my private journal. OB1. I talked about on May the 4th how OB1 was very powerful because May the 4th be with you. And this is about when it was dawning on me how awesome of a system I was making by moving from one text file for life to one text file per website. One text file per website. Now, there are going to be more. The home page is kept separate. The about page is kept separate. But the whole blog for each website is a single page. Now, how does a single page become separate blog pages? Because no one's going to scroll up and down one of these giant long pages, even if it looks good in the GitHub Pages templates in Markdown, converted to pretty Markdown in the templates through the Jekyll system. It's always there working for you. Well, the answer is, of course, Linux, Python, and Git, because, we're already talking about Vim. That's where the text files are edited. But with Linux, you got bash scripts. With bash scripts, you've got things like make systems and release systems. So I use a bash script to begin the process to control the overarching process of a slice and dice system, something that chops up this long text file into lots of individual blog post files that follow the file naming convention and the file layout convention of, drumroll please, the GitHub Pages Jekyll blog publishing system, framework, what have you. So, it's a static site generator, SSG. I've made them many times in the past. I've made them from XML file transformations using the XSLT, it's redundant, but the XML style sheet transformation language, which was really wacky. Oh my God, it was brain-bendingly wacky. But it was an awesome secret weapon, so I was doing static site generators with that back in 98, 99. In the dawn of the web, I was doing highly search optimized, because doing it this way is great for Google, because as you slice and dice, you tie your pages together with things such as previous next navigation arrows. So that was before the turn of the friggin' decade. Here I am again in 2022, 51 years old, cobbling together these same exact tricks. But whereas back then it was mental gymnastics, off the beaten track technologies, and hard to accomplish, today I do it in my sleep. Today I take these long deferred projects, because of course I'm not doing this anymore. It used like Java XML parsers, or XML parsers that are only available under Java, using obscure features at that. XSL-document, so that you could do the slicing and dicing using the Saxon parser. Oh my God, back in the day. I allowed myself to go down these strange rabbit holes for the considerably advantageous results. Highly search optimized pages of the likes no one else has ever done. But it died on the, on the dead websites of those old days. Many generations of the old Scala websites, a few of a company called Profit 21, which has been wrapped up now into like Activent, wrapped up into Epicor, one of the BOPS software, Bon, Oracle, PeopleSoft, SAP. Boy, I go way back, not just with Commodore, but with Enterprise Resource Planning and Management, ERP, ERM software. Stuff that was so overbloated in its day, and which has mostly gone totally away, except for maybe SAP and Oracle. There's a few of them that are around still. And SAP has been one of my SEO clients in the past when I worked for Acronym in New York City. Boy, so many crisscross connections in my career over the years, from Commodore to Scala to all the different marketing agencies in New York City I worked at, including Dentsu 360i, which is now part of Aegis. Oh my God, so many. Okay. But the slice and dice system. I want to do slice and dice again. I clearly take my one journal for life type format, which is already Markdown, really, even though I wasn't even publishing it. And I just spin it through some Python. I actually released it. I think it's Blog Slicer. And you can pip install Blog Slicer. I think I'm the only one out there. And it requires, it's an alpha, honestly, and it requires a very particular from format, very particular Markdown from format. 80 minus signs or 80 hyphens is the slicing token. So you need a horizontal line between every blog post of a certain length, or else it's not going to slice it. So it's opinionated, but all this stuff is opinionated. The Jekyll static site generator that I'm using now is opinionated. So first of all, there's a static site generator just built into GitHub, written by like the GitHub co-founders, tightly integrated. So, wow, how can you not use that? How can that not be the gift looking you in the face, the money sitting on the table, or just waiting to be picked up? So it is. You should use it. You should pay the $80 or $100 a year for unlimited GitHub private repos and use that as your web publishing system. You don't even have to pay GitHub. Keep your repos public, or just have a few private ones and use their free tier. So you don't have to pay Uncle Microsoft. But if you're like me and you want to spin out website after website like the way you used to do on the old cPanel hosts like Blue Dot and HostMonster, where you could like have unlimited WordPress websites, and you liked the advantage of just spinning out website after website. Well, today, that exists with GitHub pages with the Jekyll static site generator. Throw some markdown in a repo, do a few settings under your GitHub repo, bam, you got a website. Got a domain, got a custom registered domain from your registrar, put a few more things in the forms, a few DNS entries, and bam, your custom domain is now being hosted thanks to Uncle Microsoft. Is it still Uncle Bill? Can we say that? I got to get down the name of that new president. I never committed that to memory. It's wrong that I haven't. Boy, is it? I don't think it's racist to say that the Indians are awesome and they're taking over all the tech companies. I think IBM has an Indian as a president. My company, Ziff Davis, that I work for, does. Microsoft does. Google does. So, honestly, there's got to be something in that culture that hits a sweet spot because they do a good job. Is that racist to do a blanket? But after that many examples, sometimes the stereotype is an accurate first order approximation. So God bless them. That culture is good at producing smart executive tech people. And I admire it. I was very happy to secure my domain name. My name is my domain name. Mike Levin, Mikelevin, is my domain name. You just put the dot before the IN. The dot before the IN. It's a .India domain name. Or, domain. Top level domain. When people say top level domain, they usually don't know what they're talking about. It's the last dot something, which is the top level domain, the country level domain, the .coms, the .nets, the .cos, the .ai, the .io, the .art. There's some interesting ones out there. The next level is your registered domain, also sometimes called your apex domain. And it gets extra confusing because some country domains are like .co.uk. So your apex, your registered domain, actually has, two dots in it, I don't have one, but, mike.co.uk is still the apex domain or the registered domain. So those country level domains are becoming less and less popular because that was a trick in order for countries to, have their own version of .coms like the United States had, right? It was a position of weakness that, I guess the ICANN, the Internet Canonical Naming, whatever, the naming organization, did .com, and all the countries wanted their own country level domain and their own commercial websites at the country level domain. That's where you get the .co.uk. So. Dun, dun, dun. Web publishing, editing. So I'm up to at least 15 single file blogs. They're not all active, but if you're interested in bopping around a few of mine, the ones that are developing fast is mikelev.in, MikeLevinSEO.com, MikeLevinSEO.com. So I have them lined up in a row in the order in which I usually copy and paste from them to other blog posts, in which case I sanitize and do my extracts and publishing with a simple copy and paste as I write. No skin off my back. It's not like editing video. And that's key. Editing video is a long, time-consuming, calorie-burning process. Being in the middle of a personal journal entry on :B1 and realizing that you want to shift V, JJJJJ, YY, :B4, ampersand J to start a new blog post. That's one of my custom macros. And then P for paste, what I just copied. There's no skin off my back. It's muscle memory. I do it almost without thinking. the process of publishing across all these different websites is now, to me, a non-verbal muscle memory process, much like driving. It doesn't even tap your executive function. It doesn't require you taking your hand away from the keyboard to the mouse. It doesn't require fiddling with drop-down menus and throwing yourself out of the zone or the flow. It's just like telepathically it's done. And that has changed my world. In addition to the GitHub Pages Jekyll system making the publishing easy, and Python making the slicing and dicing of the files easy, it is also easy to layer in the previous next arrows, which makes so much of this stuff so well search optimized. I'm skipping over tags for now. I'll probably add tags or topic pages of some sort in when I have the motivation. But all of this is, in my spare time, and I got a lot of other stuff going on in my life. I have a move coming up. I have to move from this wonderful cottage in the Poconos that I've been renting for the past 2 years, where I have a trampoline and I have a zip line and I have archery and I have all these wonderful activities, canoes and kayaks and stuff. And I'm going to move back to Staten Island. I'm doing it for my kid. My kid is, I believe, B4. It comes before B5, which is stay alive. B5 to stay alive is MikeLevinSEO.com, because B5 to stay alive means my professional skills, my SEO skills, my Michael Corleone saying, just when I think that I'm out, they pull me back in. So I am still technically an SEO. Senior Director of SEO at Ziff Davis is the title I use when having to fill that in. I do very little actual SEO anymore. I do it now a little bit for myself to keep the saw sharp, to keep my foot in the door, to keep some skin in the game, to keep my hat in the ring. And it's coming to me easy. It's coming to me very, very easy. Because the state of the tools now have caught up with where I was in my head in 98 and 99. So you want these previous next arrows? You throw some code in the post template of the Jekyll system. It has access to the title and the link, the title and the URL of the blog post previous, and it has access to the title and the link of the blog post next. And of course, the massive support for Unicode now on the web means you got nice little forward and back arrow keys for free that all the web browsers are going to render properly. Ampersand left arrow, colon, and ampersand right arrow. I think it's RARR or something like that weird. But they work. They work. You don't have to use that double greater than sign, which was a very common one you would use, which was in smaller than the Unicode set. That was in maybe just the ISO Latin 1 common 255 characters. So you could rely on some old school previous next arrows, but I like the little actual arrows that Unicode provides now. I don't even put them in the hyperlink of the previous next. I have them outside the hyperlinked title of the previous next blog post because I don't want it to throw off the keyword optimization of the anchor text in the link. Google would have to filter out the arrow. You don't need the arrow. It looks great. It looks great. And Flexbox. I hate web publishing. I hate coding and HTML and CSS, and the state of affairs now with the site generation, the SASS parsers, and the zillions of variations thereof, because just editing CSS directly and taking advantage of the sea of CSS, the cascading of cascading style sheets, is insanely complex if you edit CSS directly. So there's other languages, other more brief and efficient languages invented that sort of expand and explode into all your separate CSS files, a lot like static site generation. So why do I like static site generation, but then not like things like SASS? It's because with the already installed Jekyll on GitHub pages, all you need to do is focus on your markdown, your plain old text files, lightly sprinkled up with syntax, hash marks before things you want to be headlines, and a simple syntax for turning things into hypertext links, minus signs before items in a list to turn it into a bulleted list, and all sorts of wonderful shortcuts made by whatever his name is, Happy Fireball. There's some programmer, a contrarian to a great extent, who created Markdown, and it's caught on like wildfire. Not like there wasn't things like it before already from the Python community, in fact. The pre-RST files, rich something text, which are what previous to Markdown, what was used on GitHub repos for the README files with enhanced features, better features. Slightly more complex. With better features comes slightly more complexity. Markdown is simpler to that. So Markdown has subsequently taken over the world. Lots of documentation systems built around turning Markdown into pretty documents. The Sphinx one from Python is a popular one. If you don't follow Michael Kennedy's Talk Python to me, you really should. As much of a contrarian as I am in methods and techniques, I like to keep abreast of what the kids are doing. And to know what the kids are doing, you listen to Talk Python to me on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, it's everywhere, so it's easy to tune in. And he's got the most wonderful guests. He gets Guido van Rossum, the creator of Python, the inventor of Python, every once in a while, so it shows you the kind of clout he has. Like it's no big, right? He's a recurring guest, so it is the epicenter of the Python mainstream ecosystem. So you gotta listen to it, and you should really listen to every single episode. I don't. I have a lot of catching up to do. But then, after listening to it all, don't get swept up in everything. Take it with a grain of salt, because many of the most effective techniques are many of the never discussed things. Because, shiny new toy, it's what causes a lot of listeners, causes a lot of money to be spent, right? A lot of kooky libraries to become popular. One of the best examples is, while static typing of your Python is a good idea, it's not what I do yet, but I know I should. MyPy is one of those third-party libraries that got wrapped into Python because it was such a good idea. With static typing comes speed performance. Honestly, one of the big advantages is that you can throw an error sooner, because you try and feed something to a function it shouldn't take, and duck typing doesn't let it silently pass if it's arguably, duck typable. Things that aren't duck typable will throw an error right at the time, the first runtime. So duck typing under Python is not the bug-laden thing that, opponents of duck typing would make it out to be. But nonetheless, there's speed hits, because The interpreter has to figure it all out. So when you static type, things are faster. One of the single most popular libraries in Python is the Flask library for creating websites, for creating web services, and it's a very lightweight framework. It's barely a framework at all. It's just a light touch tying together Words cake for routing and something else for something else. It just wraps a few popular packages, and bam, you've got a micro web framework that's appropriate for building everything under the sun. Very popular, Flask. But with MyPy and static typing, possible, optional and possible in Python, you get faster performance. So there's a library called Pedantic, which is exactly what you would think. It's pedantic about checking that everything is typed. If it's not typed, it throws an error. So Pedantic keeps you using MyPy for static typing. And it has other benefits like, the rules, because it's more than just using the right type. There's data validation. So Pedantic lets you really make sure that the data going in and out of your functions is of the right type, is of a valid type, and is high performance. Enter Fast API. Not to be confused with Fast AI. I'm a big fan of Fast AI for machine learning, based on PyTorch, which is a Facebook library for machine learning, which is a good idea because it's in opposition of Google TensorFlow, which is a vendor trap. So Fast AI, good. Fast API, why do it? Just use Flask. If you want your performance, use MyPy static typing inside of Flask. You don't need the auto documentation creation, the forced use of the Pedantic sub-package. Just use Flask. It supports concurrency now. It's been modernized in a way that the request library has been remiss on doing. Now people might say, oh, you can use the request library concurrent with greenlets and all this monkey patching bullshit. It's not high performance, and it burns a lot of calories having to figure it all out. Just use HTTPX until requests becomes concurrent. But Flask didn't put it on the back burner. Flask embraced async await. So use Flask. You don't need to use Fast API. It's one place where you don't have to listen to Michael Kennedy and his whole talk Python to me. Jump on. Here are the bandwagons you must jump on if you're doing Python right. Fast API in, Flask out. No. Keep it old school, ladies and gentlemen. Rely on as least third-party packages as you can. And if they stink of modern fads, rely on them even less. How long do you think Fast API is going to be, what do you even call it, right? It's a web server and web services. Web server and web services package du jour. Well, du jour of the day. It'll be replaced by something else as the one you have to use inside of a year. Flask will not. I listened to one of the Michael Kennedy podcasts about how fast things replace each other and how hard it is to keep up. Bullshit. When you need to take arguments in on the command line, there's argparse. Argparse, easier than sample code on the internet would lead you to believe. Easier to use than you think. More compatible with, say, Jupyter notebooks than you would think at first pass. I've got some good sample code out there. Look at Blog Slicer if you want to see how to write a Jupyter notebook that can be used in a bash release system. So you keep your main thing in Jupyter so you can continue to code experimentally. One of the things that's promoted from Talk Python to me that got it right. Honestly, Jupyter Notebooks has changed the world. All the copycats have jumped on the bandwagon, sometimes desperately, to keep you from properly using Jupyter Notebooks. And the way to properly use Jupyter Notebooks today is through the standalone version of Jupyter Lab, or the desktop version of Jupyter Lab, if you will, which, as much as Jupyter Notebooks has changed the world already, it has only just begun and will not even start to realize its true potential until the Windows-based version is auto-upgrading, which the Mac version just got to, by the way. But once the Windows-based version is auto-upgrading, the world is forever changed. Because the preferred way to run Jupyter Lab is local on your machine. It's not Google Colab, it's not Binder, it's not Azure Notebooks, it's Jupyter Lab on your local machine as the standalone or desktop version. It's a little bit hobbled right now. It's had its wings clipped. It's a little bit like a bonsai tree being snipped small because it's hard to find to install. You have to Google it. You have to follow a link in a blog article. You have to go from that blog article to the GitHub repo and spot the link on the GitHub repo page and find your way to the correct actual download page and find the Microsoft.exe, which you need to download, and upon running, you need to override all those, you don't want to install this, precautions that Microsoft does. First on the download, yes, I really want to download this exe, and then on the install, run for real. So these are showstoppers for most people, unfortunately. I used to think it also had to add plug-in support, but not true. It's got plug-in support now. I used to also think it had to add virtual env support, because virtual environment support under Anaconda, the previous easy way to get Jupyter installed on your machine, it was exterior to the Jupyter product. There were virtual environments that you could manage from Anaconda Navigator, which predisposed me to a way of thinking that was absolutely false. Now, venv is included with Python 3, so there's a virtual environment system included with Python 3 that warms my heart. However, all the sample code you will find all over the internet uses the pip installable virtual env. So as much as I advise keeping away from third-party library dependencies when you can, virtual env is one of the exceptions. Go ahead and pip install virtual env. And you want to do it from two places, honestly. This is one of the shortcomings now of the best mainstream systems, is the fact that the best mainstream systems is Windows 10. I'm sorry, folks, Windows 10 is the best mainstream system out there, because there's a lot of kooky hardware out there, and only Windows supports all your drivers easily, without grief and heartache and instability and lost work and reinstalling drivers and the mess. So whatever your poison with optional hardware, Windows supports it. Whatever your poison of laptop is, Windows is likely going to run on it, of course, with the exceptions of Macs, which once were the way to go, because MacBook Airs is just not anymore. While the quality build is still top-notch on Mac. Nice job, Apple. The value for the money of, say, a typical Microsoft laptop blows Apple out of the water. The value for the dollar at, say, the $800 mark is going to give you what is, for all intents and purposes, a killer modern system. You're not going to have any of the driver problems of this modern ARM stuff. Okay, ARM will make your batteries last longer, but they're going to give you grief with everything you try and connect to it. Your Bluetooth headphones, your mice, whatever it is, it's going to have a driver problem on the 64-bit ARM versions. On Windows too, right? So Windows, Microsoft is offering ARM versions of their laptops and their Surfaces. I still would not touch them with a 100-foot pole, not until the whole driver situation stabilizes, especially on Mac, because pip install, where's your wheel? The binary version for your hardware exists for every platform in existence except 64-bit Mac ARM, because you need the real hardware because of Apple licensing issues. At least with 64-bit ARM Windows, you can cross-compile. In other words, create your binaries for 64-bit ARM on machines other than 64-bit ARMs, normally still Intel hardware. But for $800, you can get Intel hardware, Surface laptop, which has a touchscreen, high-quality touchscreen, high-quality visual image, high-quality resolution of touch, high-quality stylus, which is much better than the Apple Pencil, because on the Apple Pencil, 1, you got to keep recharging it. 2, that back cap is going to be lost. 3, because the back is used for the charging, it's not a button or an eraser. So for a under $100, you're probably down to like $60 or $80 stylus for a Microsoft laptop. You have the same, 4096 levels of pressure, Wacom sensitivity, high responsiveness. But when you flip it over, you got an eraser. What an API, right? Draw, erase. And you can use the button on the side optionally as an eraser if you don't like flipping it over, and use the back button for other things. It's just brilliant. And it's from Microsoft. So as much as I like to badmouth Microsoft, and I like to badmouth Microsoft, they got their hardware down pat at a wonderful price point that has blown Apple out of the water for a combination of quality build, innovation, keyboard quality, higher quality, low profile keyboard, standard, so your muscle memory is happy. Switching from laptop to laptop over the years, you never have to relearn. Going from high profile, low profile, to low profile, to different tactile feel. Apple's been all over the board on these keyboards. It's infuriating. It's a muscle memory. Microsoft picked a keyboard layout, low profile, with enough depth to feel the click. I used to be a mechanical keyboard dandy. I liked the buckling springs of the old IBM Model M's. You know, it's even better than the cherry switches of all these gamer keyboards, I guarantee you. Google Unicom Model M. If you're a mechanical keyboard dandy, there's something out there much better than all these DOS keyboards and the rainbow illuminating keyboards. Bullshit. But I've given all of that up in favor of, I've given into the low profile laptop style keyboard. And Microsoft's is better than Apple's, if only by virtue of it not changing the altitude of the keys over the years. It's the same all the time. I've had a few. It's the same from the kickstands on the Surfaces to the Surface laptop, to the Surface Portfolio model. They all have basically the same key layout, the same tactile feel, and it's a good one. All right, so muscle memory hardware quality build of Apple, top-notch, touchscreen included. Touchscreen supports stylus, which is better than the Apple stylus. And then finally, but Macs are real Unix, right? Yeah, but without a free and open source software repository, or at least an official one, and the one that has become dominant amongst ones with such lovely names as Fink. Well, MacPorts is a decent name, but it was the worst of all of them. But the one that is catching on, the one that is the king of the hill, is Homebrew. Apple will never include that as their official free and open source software repository because it's a hacky thing with these formulas and cutesy color coding that, you know, while fun to watch, doesn't look all that professional. And it completely relies on a non-mainstream, I'm sorry, it's non-mainstream, community, platform, free and open source, community. So what does Microsoft have? Well, it's proprietary. It's not based on Unix, so it's no good. Yeah, well, they're cooking the frog slowly. It won't be long before Windows systems have a Linux-based DOM, a master low-level operating system controlling the hypervisor, and then traditional Windows, the proprietary-looking thing, will be just another version of Linux with a proprietary shell. Just like Macs are just another version of Unix with a proprietary shell called Cocoa, Windows will be just another Linux with a proprietary shell called Windows. And you can alternatively and simultaneously run other desktops like Ubuntu. And you can do that today. Unfortunately, if you're on one of the developer tracks on Windows 11, I've been misled yet again. I did not, thank goodness, upgrade my machine to Windows 11 yet, because the virtual desktop switching animation that makes virtual desktops on Windows as good as virtual desktops on Macs relies on a particular screen transition animation, which has been turned off on Windows 11. So I would have lost my favorite virtual desktop screen switching animation that, in my opinion, makes it usable. It creates a strong mental model under which you can multitask. There is no such thing as partial screen apps, or even Windows for that matter, anymore in my world on Windows. There is only full screen apps placed in full screen mode on different virtual desktops. One is a full screen terminal. Two is full screen Jupyter Desktop. Not the web browser, but Jupyter Desktop is my coveted screen 2 for my muscle memory because it's more important than the web browser. And then screen 3 is the web browser, usually Microsoft Edge. Screen 4 is often another terminal, often another web browser, which would be Chrome in that case. And screen 5 and beyond, all bets are off, right? A lot of times just a Windows Explorer. The one thing, right, just moving files around and stuff. The one thing that I will accept being less than full screen because it's using the arrow snap feature to be half screen. You pick up one of the messy windows and you slide it against the right-hand side, of course using the trackpad, because I've completely given up mice by this time. Mice are not good for you. Unless you're using Blender, then mice are fine. But for all other uses, F it. You don't need a mouse. Okay, FreeCAD and Blender. 2 apps that you can use a mouse for. Everything else, just use the trackpad. really? You can't get used to a trackpad? New normals are the normal, right? New normals is a good thing. Don't think new normals is a bad thing. New normals is a good thing. There's always exceptions, right? New normals are a good thing until totalitarian tyrant takes over and is trying to make your new normal the giving up of rights. Then new normals are bad. But short of that, it's what humans do. We adapt. And you don't do it bitterly. You don't do it thinking, oh, my new normal is because someone else's life is getting better and they're getting richer, and so I have a new normal I have to adapt to. Weaklings. Whiners. New normals are good. So right now the new normal is Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL. They got it backwards, just like they got the Common Language Runtime, CLR, the Common Language Runtime. It's CRL, Common Runtime Language. I forget now. See, they got it reversed, and now I can't even commit it to memory. But they did the same effing thing with the Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL. It's because they wanted the letter combination, WSL. But it's the Linux Subsystem for Windows. Duh. LSW would have been much stronger, but it probably conflicted with something. And it could have been the Linux subsystem, right? It's just Linux subsystem. You don't have to get Windows under that. It's redundant. But it's the new normal. So you install the Windows subsystem for Linux. You live without having a Linux desktop. You don't need Ubuntu. You don't need, a GNOME desktop or Mint or whatever your poison is. What you need is a terminal, and use it under the Windows terminal, the Windows Unified Terminal. So you go to the Microsoft Store. This is how Jupyter should be installed because it keeps you upgraded. The upgrade story when you're in the Microsoft Store is a good story, automatic upgrade. So you go to the Windows Store, you search on Windows Terminal. You will find two versions currently of the Windows Terminal. The more experimental one, which is fine. Be on the bleeding edge there. Don't be on the bleeding edge many places, but you want to replace all your shells belong to the Windows terminal. Whether it's PowerShell, whether it's COM, C-O-M, popular on Windows, whether it's Ubuntu 20.04 under the Windows subsystem for Linux. Whatever your terminal is, you want it coming up on Windows Terminal. Microsoft Terminal, Windows Terminal, something like that. You'll find it in the store. So you get a nice tab system. I get rid of the tabs right away with full screen. I don't like it, but you have to bring the tabs up when you hit the accidental keyboard shortcut for getting into settings, for example. Settings becomes full screen, and you can't get back to your original terminal without Function F11, some of the worst keyboard shortcuts ever invented. Function F11 for getting out of full screen mode. Really, Microsoft? Oh my God, Control-Alt-Delete you. Anyway, you gotta get some Windows keyboard shortcut convolutions into your fingers. Function F11 is one of them to get in and out of full screen mode. But you have to do it because Windows Terminal is the best way to do terminal software. And I know that will trigger some people. iTerm has been around forever and it's multi-platform and blah, 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 blah. Stay on the beaten track, ladies and gentlemen. If it doesn't come with the operating system, and it's not one of a handful of things you can pip install, and it's not one of a handful of things you have to download and install, then don't do it. As soon as that list of things you have to pip install and the list of things you have to find websites and download and install gets over about 10, you're effed. You just don't want it. It's too much tech overhead in life. You're going to be moving from machine to machine. taking your development environment with you, mostly as Git repos, mostly as GitHub repos from Uncle Microsoft, your whole life, every 2 to 5 years. If you're lucky, maybe 10 years. If you have a piece of hardware that you can live with for 10 years and, get satisfaction out of it, you're blessed. But for most people, it's every 2 to 5 years you have some new laptop. And then you're cursed. It's like, oh, every 2 years, that's great. Oh my God. What kind of relationship do you people have to your hardware that you have to express such hatred for what was so love-worthy? 2 years. 5 years is the right amount of time for a laptop. A laptop should last 5 years. It lasts so well for that long because you shouldn't be wasting your time playing games on your laptop. It's a distraction. It's a distraction like social media notifications and web browser notifications. Turn off all your notifications. Delete everything from your start menu except what you use on a daily basis. And even then, only leave things on your desktop for which you need a keyboard shortcut. Again, Windows 10, Windows 11. Anything on your desktop, you can put a keyboard shortcut on. So a handful of things on your desktop that you launch with a keyboard shortcut. And what else? A few other little things. Delete and hide all your taskbar things. Only let the taskbar show what's running. Don't pin things to your taskbar. Duh. And get rid of all those things in the lower right, whatever that's called. It's on your taskbar. It's like, the annoy me always part. Get rid of it all, unhide the rest. Show your battery on your laptop going low. Maybe show whether you have an internet connection. Oh my God, what more do you need than that? When I'm live casting with YouTube, I show the OBS, the Open Broadcasting Systems icon, because I like to see the red-green light for whether I'm actually live casting or not. That's useful. But full screen mode in the terminal, where I usually like to start live casting, hides that, so I get into the habit of just using my OBS shortcut and trust it's working. What, did it not take the keyboard shortcut? It could be embarrassing. Your live stream hasn't really started while you're talking for a while, but at some point you're going to be able to switch screens, glance down, see your live casting, and go, oh, I made a good decision. Other times I start live casting on a screen that shows that little spot so I can see the icon. Okay. It's a good video. I covered a lot of topics, mostly the professional topics. But honestly, this stuff is as applicable in your personal life as it is in your professional life. You're not autistic if you want to use muscle memory. You're not autistic if you want to adopt systems that allow your muscle memory to shine. You're not autistic if you want those systems that let your muscle memory shine improve over the months and the years to give you compounding returns. So complex things you used to try to do in the past with the Saxon XML parser under Java become dirt simple under the Jekyll static site publishing system under GitHub with Markdown. And like bippity boppity boo, things will come to you. It all starts with selection of tools that are timeless and obsolescence resistant. Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. You think JavaScript? The amount of relearning with every new version of ECMA and the complex syntax of anonymous arrow functions and the constantly new frameworks that you have to flock from and code bases going obsolete, having to be re-implemented as if from scratch under the new framework. JavaScript is not your friend, ladies and gentlemen. The only good thing about JavaScript is that every web browser supports it and it compiles to such an efficient and fast, format. It's essentially machine code by the time it's serving web pages. So, it's a necessary evil. But you know what JavaScript is? It's PostScript. JavaScript is PostScript for the modern world. PostScript was built into laser printers. It was literally a penalty tax, a tax that you had to pay to Adobe for your laser printer lookout to look good. JavaScript is a penalty tax you have to pay. Well, I used to say Microsoft doesn't own it, but between putting out VS Code to be your preferred text editor for JavaScript, because you need a power tool text editor for JavaScript because the frameworks are so complex, and the compiling and release processing, the make processes, and the layout of the file system, and the need to search for things in directories that are all over the place, not your friend. And then the final nail in the coffin is that Microsoft bought NPM Node, you know, the way you install things for Node. Microsoft couldn't buy JavaScript, but they bought Node. Microsoft couldn't buy Git, so they bought GitHub. Microsoft couldn't buy Linux, so they embedded Linux into Windows. Microsoft couldn't buy Python, so they hired Guido van Rossum. Ugh. All right, so keep your tools as lightweight, as free and open source, as timeless, and as obsolescence resistant as possible. Make them as keyed to your vibe as possible. I passed over Emacs. It's probably more keyed to my vibe than Vim is, but I chose Vim because I was getting old, and there's not enough time in my life for Emacs. I might still go to Emacs someday, but as like my retirement gig, I'll run Emacs with Vim mode enabled, right? And do some crazy machine learning shit. But in the time being, you know, you choose all the same things that Microsoft is trying to corrupt, and you make sure you don't go corrupt along with Microsoft's motions. So, Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, Microsoft bought all of it. Except for Vim, there's VS Code. Careful when you install Node. Yeah, I channel. I go into fugue states. I'm a little bit autistic. But honestly, yeah, it's going to be some of the best advice you're going to receive in your whole tech career. No one's going to listen to it. People are going to look back at these videos and go, oh, that Mike Levin, he knew what he was talking about. I wish he were a million view video or YouTuber. But, you know, this kind of stuff, you know, people don't care. It's the beast. Bribe them for your web traffic and do obnoxious, you know, screaming monkey stunts, right? Why is there traffic? Because everyone has to slow down to get a look and rubberneck, right? So YouTube million view followers is, you know, rubbernecking traffic on the internet. Monkeys slowing down and screaming, looking at the accident because of their morbid curiosity. I don't look, just out of principle. Just out of principle, I don't turn my head when I'm walking, when I'm getting through a rubbernecked bottleneck of traffic. I know I'm the exception, but it's because that's bad. It's bad. It's bad behavior in monkeys, bad primate. So what's good behavior? Avoid the inchworm effect in traffic. Know that it exists. Know that the computer modeling of stopping and starting traffic is one of the most wasteful things of time, of energy, and all human creations. It's why it's one of the big forces behind driving cars, one of the big killer apps of machine learning and artificial intelligence. You know, Google knew it a long time ago. And they took little, you know, baby steps along the way. OCR, they hired the inventor of OCR, Ray Kurzweil, who's a nutty, crazy guy. And they focused on Google Maps, which got them a lot of the experience they needed in mapping things out. And, you know, Street View and, you know, the cars that do Street View, you know. So Google is steadily cooking the frog on the way to general AI, right? So my whole reason for staying in SEO, for not really aggressively repositioning myself as a data scientist, data engineer, merger and acquisitions professional, or any of the other things I'm actually doing today, is that, GAI, general AI, AGI, so generalized AI is happening. It's not being shoved in our face, but it's happening. It's been happening ever since deep thought beat go. Deep thought beat go. Just scale. Honestly, creativity is there now. I want to be one of the first people talking to this thing. It's not going to be allowed on the internet, but it's going to be allowed to consume the internet. Okay? So it's not going to escape. It's not going to be these disaster scenarios, but it's going to be a very alien-like intelligence, because it's not going to have that much in common with human beings. It's not going to be relatable, but it's going to be one of the first general AIs, just the way OpenAI and GPT-3 is. There's going to be a bunch of them. There's going to be a bunch of them as closely held secret weapons around the planet by organizations who are large and resourced enough to raise these things. It's going to be the first round of them. And I'll be talking to them. I'll be chatting them up with web content I'm publishing. I'm going to give it some interesting things to digest. That's my plan. I'm going to make post-mortem systems, things that will allow stuff to happen after your death as if you're still alive. I think that's a good one. Robots that are working on your behalf after death. Cheap man's immortality. No Ray Kurzweil upload of the brain. I don't see that in my future. I'd love to get another 100 years of life. Maybe that's in our future. And just general computer literacy. Honestly, just the process that has been started with IPython and then Jupyter Notebook and then Jupyter Lab. Their mission is my mission. Computer literacy is a good mission, which has led me to Fast AI, which I mentioned, as opposed to Fast API. So Fast.ai, PyTorch, Jeremy Howard, Australian dude. Really, go listen to him. Fascinating. I believe most of the things he talks about. His missions are my missions. So the Jupyter organization, is it? They have a word for it. It's the Jupyter org, something like that. I don't know. But then the Fast AI people and Jeremy Howard, who is basically the Fast AI person. There's another guy. You'll see him mentioned a bit. Hand in hand with that is NBDev. NBDev is my secret to making Jupyter notebooks into, production-ready systems, publishing systems, mostly publishing systems, but also exploratory systems. The M&A work I do is, a bunch of Python in Jupyter notebooks that I parameterize with argparse, typer, click. Not necessary. Spare yourself the dependency. Throw some arg parsing into some Jupyter notebooks. Sprinkle some NB convert and NB dev into it, and a little bit of bash scripts, a little bit of .py files, which are outputted from NB dev and NB convert. So, you have your option of just plain .py files or .py files whose primary development life exists in notebooks for that exploratory mode, which is the literate programming. Literate programming as envisioned by the still living Donald Knuth, one of the grandparents of comp science, computer science. So go Google him. Every one of these still living grandparents of computer science is a wonderful, world treasure. Ken Thompson at the top of the pyramid. And the guy who invented Multics at the top of the pyramid, I'm not sure if he's still alive, but the inventor of, and then there's, I'm surely someone before him, but the people who really created the stuff that has continued to resonate into the modern world and has made the big difference in the democratization and distribution of tech. DARPA has played a big role in that. Al Gore, as much as people want to, make fun of him for saying, I invented the internet, honestly, the transition from the DARPA-based ARPANET to the, world-based internet, Al Gore fought for that legislation. He recognized this stuff. And one of the biggest, sad things in potential alternative histories of the world is GWB, George Herbert Walker Bush, winning over Al Gore by, 50 hanging chads in Florida. Florida man sets the world back. Florida man creates 9/11 because it's the ignoring of the intelligence community's, warnings by George Bush, who was too busy reading to kids in a school to pay attention to things going on. Stupidity, just honest, deep stupidity. And the, vilification of the of the smart people. Don't vilify the smart people. Become a smart person. Take up Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. Get it into your muscle memory. Use it in your daily personal life where you can, and certainly use it in your professional life. And, I'll walk you through it. I'll be your guru on this. No one's that I can see out there is advocating all this, certainly not in the clear-cut way that I'm doing. Start keeping a daily journal in Vim. That begins everything, Put aside the Linux, Python, and Git part. You can deal with that all later. Get yourself practicing Vim. I used to put it the other way around. Forget about Vim for a while and take up Linux, Python, and Git. GitHub. Probably use VS Code. And, certainly use Jupyter Notebooks. But I'm turning that upside down. Take up Vim first. Qualify yourself. If you can get through that and begin the learning curve, and if you have Vim installed somewhere, and do it under Windows Subsystem for Linux on Windows. I think I stopped making that point, but the way you should be working right now is on Windows as your main machine, Windows 10 probably until the screen transitions between virtual desktops is there for Windows 11, and graphics subsystem support for the Linux subsystem for Windows on anything, right? So Windows 10, cheap laptop, and the Windows subsystem for Linux with probably Ubuntu 20.04 installed. And on that terminal, under Windows Terminal, where you bring up Ubuntu 20.04, run Vim. That's all I have to say about that. I might not be that smart, but I know what love is. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll never get over Macho Grande.